technologies do you see over the next 2 years are going to have an accelerating effect on the demise of the traditional enterprise data center?
Maybe I start?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I think everybody is working in an enterprise company, and been working for enterprise companies as well, like Juniper Networks, which also have their own data center network as well in the end. You see that a lot of applications anyway, like becoming outsourced, things are becoming software as a service. I mean, the key applications that companies run like CRM, ERP, or anyway, software as a service solutions that don't run in the own data center anymore anyway. So the amount of applications that stay in the own data center, is going down anyway, year by year. It's even, email today, Microsoft 365, whatever you have, everything goes to the cloud anyway. I mean, it's really happening very, very fast at the moment. So what people typically keep, inside, as is what they consider still so far, their mission critical data, that they don't want to share because they're doing a lot of R&D, for instance. They have like very confidential data to protect that they keep inside, but all the rest, yes, we see going, in the cloud, going to a kind of software as a service type of application. So I can absolutely see, in my daily life, that enterprise data centers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. More and more things are moving to our customers as cloud operators.
If I can add, there's a question that I ask people when I go into enterprise data centers. I ask this question: how many of your apps will you have outsourced somewhere else by the year 2000? And just to let you know, a very, very big enterprise in Europe told me the other day 65% of all their apps they're going to push out of their own facilities by the end of this decade. Have you, anybody got any feel on that? Did you talk to people about that, those numbers? Have you ever asked the question?
The issue is quite often I hear from the people lower down the organisation that someone has made a policy decision that regardless of working out how they do it. And I think that might be a challenge for some of them because some of them decide that 80% or 70% of our apps will move, and it's up to them to pick the 80% or maybe the 60% that can move, and which 20% do we destroy something in moving it because they're trying to hit a target that someone set as a number.
I concur. The other thing that I'm also seeing the fact that if you are in a different market segments, like you're banking, you will not see their apps being outsourced. As an example, in security, in the government, actually it's being more close and close in terms of not even allowing you to touch their apps. But in a, let's say, a retail environment, the infrastructure is agnostic about what software, and on top of it, they're willing to really outsource the apps, or they're willing even to bring in different apps. So it depends on the market, on the application, or on the use case, or the market segment that we are addressing that question. Yeah. But like the gentleman here, I don't have a specific percentage on it.
Yeah, but also eShelter as well showed, this, hybrid, environment where you have like on-premise, their own environments off-premise and then cloud, as a combination. So I think we will see, with banks, that type of approaches, where some things go out, some things stay inside. But, there are there are multinational companies with over 100,000 people which have like 0 racks inside. I mean, everything is out of the company. So it's depending, I think, these type of companies like banks and, R&D intensive companies, I think they're going to mix it. But you now see as well, data center operators that also are selling, high levels of security as well as a kind of an differentiator, how do you call it, the differentiating selling point for them to also take into their own data center, on-premise, very confidential data as well. So definitely we have some, big Swiss cloud operators as well. They're really focusing a lot on, the data protection, and you see 2 countries where they're very active with that. It's Norway and Switzerland, because they have very protective laws around, confidentiality of data. So I think it's a part of a trend, where you see, the next levels, people will trust cloud more and more, and also the confidentiality of data as well. And I think I think I agree with you that probably enterprise data centers will disappear, but probably going to take another 7-8 years, I believe.
Well, I think it's going to be like the internet didn't kill brick and mortar, and I think you'll start seeing who's the company moving into brick and mortar. Amazon with the purchase of Whole Foods. So I think you'll see the cycle continue between on-premise and off-premise. So I think we had a large customer that ended up taking about a $40 million spend with us, putting it on Amazon. After the fact, they realized it cost them twice as much. So then they're going to go in the process of bringing that back in. So I think you'll see the pendulum will continue to swing on-premise, off-premise.
And that's a very good point, because Dropbox, it was all outsourced. And when they got to a certain scale, it was just too expensive to be outsourced, and then they brought it all in-house again. This is a trend that I think is going to be an impact in the data centers here, because you've got some big cloud providers in colos here. When they scale to a certain size, they're going to look at the numbers again, and it's so cheap to build an OCP type data center, they'll probably move away from them. So it's a very interesting trend. Now, we've talked about fiber optics, and fiber optics, the pluggables they're really coming down in price considerably compared to the old branded ones. And that reduces the cost of a data center considerably. I think you can say on some of the switch solutions compared to the big brands, there might be an 80% cost differential, potentially. And a lot of it's to do with the pluggable optics. Now, if the cost of the data center gets cheaper and cheaper, it's cheaper to build one. You can build an OCP data center for half the price, and then the cost of the actual gear inside is falling really quickly. Will that give life to enterprise data centers? Will it stall it? Will it slow the situation?
Well, the question is, I guess, what percentage of the cost of the data center is hardware itself, right, versus applications or versus management of those applications, and the people, right, the people needed to operate them. I think the increasing level of costs of managed services, having the people with the right skill sets to manage those services, and what I hear, the expensive part of just running a data center itself. What you're buying is not outsourcing the equipment, but outsourcing the know-how of just running those services is what managed service basically sells. So maybe that's actually moves the pendulum in the other direction for certain verticals where I think it's more interesting to have data on premise, or even on some kind of hosted private infrastructure, even if it's co-located. But as long as that skill set is more cost effective to have a managed service company, I think private clouds will continue to grow.
I think there's also the question of where the company wants to show it on their books. So what the CFO says. If the CFO wants to see it as an expense,
right?
As an ongoing expense, then he's going to outsource. If he wants to say, okay, well, I can buy these assets and keep them as capital assets,
right,
he'll take the other route. So that happens, and that's probably why some of them have an edict of that's a percentage I want to achieve, regardless of whether it makes sense or not.
Well, I think even more importantly is, how does the company view their IT infrastructure? Is it a cost center under the CFO, or is it a strategic operation that reports to the CEO? So you look at movie studios; they view IT as an expense cost, so they're very reticent to get new technologies. Whereas you might look at a bank, very competitive; they view technology as a competitive asset, and so they'll invest. And so again, that'll show you kind of the trend of outsource, insource, running your own versus giving it away to a different cloud provider.
There's one more layer there, which is the procurement guys. So they are the ones that also, based on what David's saying, in that mix of whether they report to CFO or the CEO, but the procurement guys, where they report, it's making a lot of difference into how they are really approaching this whole concept of migration from the old and the new, and how they feel comfortable about making this kind of movement.
Okay. Now, just picking up on something, and it's come up a few times. I mentioned this morning about how many people you have in these data centers. If you go to Lulia, Facebook's data center, and OCP data center, they have a ratio of one technician to 25,000 physical server nodes. During the holiday period, it's one technician to 38,000 physical server nodes. It's 99% less people. And part of it is the automation on software. And the question that came up is, let's talk about automation of data centers. Because Ericsson there are looking, if you go on the web, you'll see a data center that Ericsson have developed, and it's fully automated. It's a robot arm that goes down the corridor, there's no people in it, and it pulls the kit in and out. You can go and look at it, it exists as a data center. So what's the future of automation in our data centers? Are we going to have people-less data centers in the future, no matter where they are, whether it's a public cloud service or whether it's an enterprise? And if so, how quickly are we going to move into that?
John, are those statistics somewhat misleading in that whether you physically need the person in the data center or whether or not you have some remote administrator?
Purely within the data center facility.
But yeah, if you take all your machines and you put them over there and you make them general purpose compute, that doesn't mean you get rid of all the people, because you may have someone sitting over here that administers them. And the orchestration of administration is another key part, I think, as to where people get employed and what will speed up or slow down.
But if we can concentrate just on the facility, the people who do that hardware stuff, so if you're going to a typical data center today, I'll see bodies walking around all the time, doing the mechanical, the electrical, doing the service support, patching, jumpering, doing change management. Do you believe that that's going to disappear? If it is, how quickly will it disappear? It's happened in the cloud providers compared to a typical enterprise. Is it going to roll into all data centers, this automation?
I think so. We're seeing a trend to tools like, again, instead of having siloed net admins, sysadmins, storage admins, going to DevOps. And to your point too, is as they talked about high availability, it's no longer at the component level. They look at it most at server level, and we'll go to rack level. So there's no reason why you couldn't have a robot. There's a bad rack, put it out once it gets to a certain state. If once 10 servers go bad, take the rack out, put a new rack in. So I think automation like that will definitely, especially as you get more commoditization in the components in the rack.
Anybody else? Automation?
Yeah, automation. I mean, what we see is the Cumulus, that on the cloud operators has already done a lot of automation from a network perspective as well. Because I'm looking at it from a network perspective, but if you look at enterprise, it's still like all kind of manual operation at the moment. If you look at data center networking, which is kind of strange, but that's why we have Linux, on the switch, because it makes it very easy to automate. But I mean, you still see, very strict silos, in all the enterprise companies at the moment, and those silos will also have to disappear, just like they have disappeared, in the pure cloud providers, because there are no silos anymore happening at the moment with large MSPs, at least the more advanced ones. And the cloud operators, you have network architects, and the job of network engineer is not disappearing, but it's becoming different, where it used to be like a network engineer, typing CLI commands and stuff like that. It becomes more like an architectural, type of job, and a lot of things will be automated. And again, we have a great video on how far you can take it today with network automation, from Romain. Aviola from Kudelski Security with a presentation on Ansible Fest, which goes way beyond, just automating with Ansible. I think that's a great, video of what you can do with, automation today in the data center, beyond just only networking. And it's with the same tools. In the case of Cumulus Linux, as you use, the tools that you already use for your data center for other operations. So it's very powerful. So people are doing much more doing intellectual work, than just like the manual work.
A question about transformation of existing facilities to OCP hardware, this gear that we've been looking at. There are all sorts of problems when you try and put some of this equipment. For example, if I order a rack from Penguin, I won't just get 1 or 2 servers, I'll get a rack fully configured, and all I do is plug it into the power and the fiber optics, job done. So the whole rack comes in, and they can be quite heavy. What's the heaviest rack you do? Over a ton?
Oh yeah, 3,500 pounds.
Yeah, because the heaviest racks on OCP, they're about 1.5 ton, and they're a little bit taller, and you can't get them in the building. So let me just throw something to you. If people start adopting this open source hardware, and they start adopting it on the rack level and try and bring it in at about 10 kilowatts a rack instead of 2.7 kilowatts a rack as an average in a, say, a colo facility, what kind of problems will that colo face?
The biggest one I have about cooling. I have a number of customers that not in the OC space, where there's no point in them buying one of your servers because all it does is fills up the rack quicker. It gives them more space in the rack, but they can't fill the rack up because they have a power limit. They have a power limit not because they can't put thicker power cables in, but because they can't dissipate the heat that they then create.
Okay.
So I think cooling, and obviously liquid cooling, is a way of transporting it to increase the heat that goes out the roof of the building. Hopefully it will be used to heat houses and other stuff nearby. I think cooling is the issue.
What about the network topology? Because it seems to impact everything. If you mentioned it, George, I think the structure of the network topology, or it might have actually been you, you've got the old structure, which is a three-layer hierarchy, and then you've got the new leaf-spine configuration. That means a totally different physical topology of cabling within the environment. How much is that going to be a problem?
Actually, it's not a problem. I think if you think about scaling, out and paying as you grow, I think it's proven to be not only cost effective but also helping you with the infrastructure. When we say infrastructure, I mean physical infrastructure, in terms of cooling, in terms of space, in terms of management of the aisles and cabling, etc. So I think I've seen growth. As an example, I can say that in Facebook, that I am surprised how effective it was, the real estate, in terms of comparison of let's say an old way and a new way of the data center. I'm not allowed to expose more, but you can really sandwich it, and you can really if you structure it right in terms of cooling, sharing, power, etc. It's actually more effective. In terms of the other question, that the automation question, as Stefan was saying, I look at automation not in terms of physical, let's say, robotic automation. I look at automation in terms of how you orchestrate, how you quickly ignite, how you quickly, scale out, scale in as a utility. And that has been tremendous in terms of how the data centers have been moving forward. So
Could you give because a lot of people are not familiar with ONI, the way you configure these switches.
Yeah.
Could somebody, either you or you,
He's the expert. He created it.
could you quickly, now ONI, this is really important because you'll understand something about how easy it is to configure all these switches. So just quickly, what's ONI?
So only actually is like the bootloader, that Cumulus developed back in, the early days of Cumulus. It was like the bootloader that we needed, to make open networking a commercial product as well, so that everybody can use it, not just, the hardware manufacturer, but also like other software distributions, also competitive to Cumulus as well. They have like this universal bootloader. So we developed it, but we made it an open source project. And, this video playing, by the way, in the, breakout room, where the developer Kurt Brun, of ONI, is actually also one of the speakers at the OCP as well. So he developed ONI, and it makes it super simple, to get OSs on top.
Can you tell them how easy it is compared to a CLI programming?
Yeah,
Harry, you do it with a little memory stick.
What people typically do is, when they add, a new rack, and a new switch, they just like take an Ansible, playbook and put it on the switch. It's zero-touch provisioning, as we call it. So it's like no configuration, actually. It's like minutes, instead of typing for hours.
So give us a difference in how much time. If I'm doing a data center with, say, 300 switches in, or a few hundred switches, using this method compared to the other method where I'm doing individual port configuration, how much quicker is it in time?
If you have to set up like 200 switches at the same time, it's like you save weeks. Okay.
And how long would this take? How long does this take?
Just like, a couple of minutes. You need to prepare your Ansible playbook, and once you have it, you flash it to all the switches that you have.
So this is just trying to show you some of the things. Now, you haven't seen how this is done, but that's how quick the the switch configuration is. It's really fast.
But that's what the automation that we should. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
physical automation is fine. Robotics is fine. Maybe we'll go there in, I don't know,
Yeah.
some odd years. It will take time, but the beauty of this ignition and then mass scale automation. That's what it is. This is all about.
Yeah.
ONI is the open networking
Installer
installer environment.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is basically a very small piece of, think about it as a network operating system, but very skinny. And it just, it's a wonderful thing that Cumulus has done relative to making that open to everybody to be able to install any software, any operating system, I should say, not software.
The scale out is one thing, but another thing is, when you have the sleep spine concept, one of the boxes fails. Okay, so the whole notion of like the Facebook network is built like everything can fail, everything will fail one day, but if it fails, it should have like an absolute minimal impact on the overall data center performance. You take out, the one new box, you put another one in the place, take your Ansible or Puppet, or SaltStack playbook, flash it on the switch and you're going again.
I'm going to come to some questions.
Sorry.
I just want to ask about one thing to do with break fix. Because when you move into these kind of environments, if you're in a traditional enterprise data center, we do something called rapid break fix. We get a failure and we respond to it really, really quickly. We get out there, we have a technician standing in front of it. How important is rapid break fix in these new kind of network infrastructures? If I lose a switch, how quickly do I need to get to it? Can you give us some information, like I know what Microsoft do, about how regular they don't do break fix. They just send a technician in every 9 days. So what?
Well, so Goldman Sachs, they just aggregate up once a quarter and send back the bad systems. They build in redundancy at the software at the level, so a single system failure does not have a cascading effect. So they don't think of things at the component break fix level. So if a power supply or RAM or drive goes bad, they just let the server go and pull it out because they have enough redundancy because of the commoditization. It's cheaper for them to do that than the person cost to go fix.
Of course, the bigger it gets, the more you can, take the time longer between, the interventions. Of course, if you have like an 8-switch data center, of course, when one of the switches breaks, you want to replace it as well in a couple of hours as well. It's very easy to do. What the customers typically do, they have 10 or 12 racks, take one cold spare, you can build easily like a leaf spine design with all the same switches as well, because you can take like a 40 gig or a 100 gig box, and break it out to 10 gigs top of rack as well. It's all the same box, you only need one spare. And it's very easy. That's
really
how people build it today.
On what you're doing. So, a banking trading app, they would have to have a really bad failure that they would even bother to touch it during the trading day. So if it failed at 9:01, they won't touch it before 5, 6 o'clock. So no point in rushing someone in for that. If you have a web design where you have 100 servers and one of them goes bad and the load is perfectly split between the other 99, they don't care at all. They don't care until the next peak comes that would need that 100 server. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you have an application where it's really critical and the application requires a single point of database or something, they become much harder. They need a much quicker fix time. Because if you can't transfer the load to someone else easily, because it's not a scale-out type application, they're the ones that still require the quick fixes. The other thing to bear in mind is that if the failure is not a hardware failure, but is to do with software, a single bug that affects all of the servers in one go, that becomes more critical.
Exactly. That's a key point between hardware and software. Where the triage is and where you're pointing the failure. But to your question, I think, John, I think you also asked the turnaround time in terms of do they send it as a one-off or do they send it as a batch? It depends on the size. But there's also one element here that if you are a service provider or you have a mega scale operator and you have your own software, your own let's say firmware, then you don't want your supplier to really get that firmware. They have to go through another batch to clean it up and then send it to you. So that's a big process.
A good example on that is hard drives that fail never get sent back for a lot of
Yes.
customers
Yeah.
because they won't risk what's on there. Well, even if they could destroy it, they wouldn't be happy to send it back. But if the controls die and the platters are still there, they won't risk sending that. They will crush it themselves.
And it depends, and it depends also to the point that if it's very rich operation, they don't care, they throw it away. I mean, literally. Or if it is based on the flash, they throw the flash away.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So there's some really good videos, and I'm going to ask go out to the audience. This bit about the network resilience is quite interesting because it is a lot more resilient. If you took out the core switch in an enterprise data center, you really have a devastating impact. Whereas when you leave spine everything, it has an enormous impact. And I think George mentioned something, reducing the blast area.
yes.
That's the trick in that you reduce the blast area. Question?
Yeah.
Ask these guys, don't ask me.
Because this is the ideal technology experts that you.
Introduce yourself,
Yeah,
where you're from as well.
I'm Sharik Javed, working as a software and networking engineer at Laban Supercomputing Center. During the last half hour or even before, I was really appreciating the transition from hardware to software and from manual to automation. Everything is looking so good. I really appreciate it. But on the other hand, it's really horrifying as a network engineer. Maybe in 10 years we are not needed anymore. Like, we have thousands of people.
No. I think overall there's like we all know that it's like a shortage of network engineers. Okay, there is a shortage of network engineers in the market, and what we want network engineers to do in the future is not to manually configure switch, but to think out designs, to and build, become more like network architects, or even the next level, become like a data center architect rather than being a network manual protocol, typer, and doing like very low level type of job. Okay, the job will become more interesting, I think, for the network and the data center engineer. And don't worry, there are not enough network engineers and IT experts in the market today. I mean, the IT space, as the world is more and more becoming kind of an automated, an IT type of world. I mean, there's a shortage, at this moment in the market, and there's a lot of need for very smart people, in the market today to think out, right concepts, ideas, because we still need, preparation to put this together. Huh? I mean, this is not falling out of the sky. Okay.
Let me add to that. We are desperately in need of real solution architects. I mean, that is the path. So if you become one, call me.
That's what I was gonna say.
I agree. I've heard that at recent nanos. I've heard that complained by many people. I mean, there are too many computer science PhDs and not enough network engineers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Okay, let's have
John,
so don't get worried about jobs,
John,
honestly.
if you excuse me, I've got to
Sorry,
do something at 4 o'clock. So
Okay.
Hope there are no more questions for me.
Do you want to carry on a little bit more? Or we can finish now, or because this is our time finished, but if you've got more questions,
Yeah.
people
Just
from
one
there today.
question, we were a bit flexible. Yeah, so
Do a few more for me? Yeah.
just one comment regarding my colleague here. Aren't we leaving out the effects of IoT completely right now? Because what I see in the industry, we have kind of what we call in Germany peak cycle, that you have this decentralization, centralization effects always, and with the new requirements of IoT and the cars that talk to each other and to a central location, which has real-time requirements and so forth. Is the case that we will have decentralized data centers as well to capture this data and to have this short answering time that is required for such kind of applications?
I mean, again, only looking at it from the optical side, but that's only the case, I think, right? This permeation of data, maybe micro data centers, smaller data centers closer to the edge, right? What people sometimes call fog computing versus cloud computing, and we're certainly working on technologies, obviously, not only access speeds that will facilitate that, but also lower the latency of those applications. So from the optical interconnection part, I think that's critical, and I think that will happen eventually. That's a question of how big and how fast, like everything with IoT, but I think it will ultimately happen. You're going to have this computing and networking clusters which are definitely distributed and closer to the actual users.
Any more comments about? Everybody's talking about the edge.
Yep.
I'll give you something. My feeling about the edge. The edge is everybody's chasing it because the enterprise data centers they're all rushing to find more business. The edge. There's a group working within the OCP community, and they've created something called a rugged pod, and it's an edge data center, and it has a PUE of 1. It's an aluminium casting with a computer storage and network gear inside in the liquid, and you just put it near the radio base station.
Yep.
It's as simple as that. There's going to be a lot of work on the edge, but I don't think it's going to be as big as you think it is. It's just going to be commoditized, really low cost, tens of thousands of these things that you're going to drop into position and then just connect them to fiber optic cables and a piece of power.
Yep.
So I don't think it's as big as, that's my view. I think everybody's rushing after it. The people who failed trying to get into the kind of hyperscales, and they're re-engineering their directions towards the edge. But that's just my view. What, am I wrong?
No, no comments, from my side on this.
One more question.
There was one more question there, yeah.
Tony.
Tony, also with Pensacola. So I know nothing about software, but I hear a really good story about open compute and the traditional vendors like Cisco, Juniper, all those guys. Only was just sold as a really great concept. Surely they have a similar fast setup solution. Like we kind of compared, well, if you use only, it's a couple minutes. If you go the old way, it's weeks. But surely the traditional way has changed in modern line to have a fast setup option. So how are they going to try and prevent open compute from taking off their business?
So what we see is, that they build their own proprietary solutions to that, okay? Which is like, might work, for some of the enterprise accounts, but that market is, is a shrinking market. So, I mean, I think I presented it as well, in my presentation. I said, I think like two extremes, in the market, and that's also why our CEO started our company in the first place, Joe Rivers, like, because he was with Cisco, building, within Chim, the first foundation of ACI, and it's like a complete lock-in. I mean, if you build like an ACI environment, which is giving you the automation and orchestration over your data center, you need to buy and Cisco switches and Cisco servers, massive amount of Cisco tools, Cisco engineers, Cisco consultants, and you can only use like firewalls and load balancers that, are part of the Cisco ecosystem. So if you're buying that, it's going to be very costly because you have zero negotiation power around the price. It's a lock-in. It's a mainframe. We believe, that the alternative is like build, complete open source type of environment, using Linux and Linux tools. I think both can work, okay, but there's going to be a significant cost. It's like you build a data center with a mainframe, or you build a data center with Linux servers. That's the difference. And I think some people are here, at least I'm old enough, to know, how mainframe used to work, how that went, from a pricing perspective, and it's more like kind of almost like ransomware. You need to pay every year to be able to continue to use your mainframe. So, yeah.
And it's just evolution. It's perceptions, reality. The market doesn't like when things aggregate at IBM, and there's a reason we're using Linux and not Open Solaris, right? I mean, all the Unix guys recognize and try to combat Linux, but the market shifted, and so I think you're seeing the market shift now. And
so maybe
it's the sound of inevitability, Mr. Anderson.
Maybe one comment, George, if I may. So, I mean, also if you look at data center networking, I mean, if you look at the market shares, I mean, we're all used to that. Cisco used to have like 70% of the market. If you look at data center networking, Cisco's now below 50% market share. Okay, so there's been a massive shift, happening today in market shares and data centers.
You can see it. You just got to look at the numbers. But what you're saying, why are they not doing it to kind of compete? They are doing it to compete, but there's a lock-in. There's a wonderful story. I don't know whether I'm on video. I'm not on video here, am I?
Yeah, you are.
You are. Oh, well, I won't tell you the story.
Oh, shit.
I won't tell you the story. But I'll tell you the story afterwards. But it's about the concept of how you lock people in. There's a piece of routing software, and he'll know it, called IGRP, and it only runs on certain hardware. You can't run it on other hardware. And I used to sell Cisco solutions for Siemens and BT, and I knew exactly how to lock a client in just by making sure they use certain routing software. And then I locked them in for Cisco for life. That's what we used to do.
I tell you, Tony, I agree with everything was said, but I have a practical side. Maybe it's not right, but here's my view. This is just purely my view. I think everything that we're seeing about disaggregation, about the best hardware, the best software, and the best solution in terms of what you really want to accomplish in terms of use case, what you want to do and give the software the power you want is perfect. It's the right direction. But your comment about the big giants like Cisco, I don't think Cisco is going to be idle. I think there will be phases that Cisco has probably eventually, I might be wrong, that's going to become a software company.
Yes. Software service.
That is the direction that Cisco can come in, and Cisco can also do everything that we're doing today. No question about it. Now, Cisco's issue is the install base and other things. But in terms of how Cisco can grab the market very quickly if they want to. But in my humble opinion, it's a journey. But eventually Cisco, Juniper's in the world, and HP's in the world, you can see them. It's going to become a system integrators, and eventually they're going to become software companies. I might be wrong, but that's
You're exactly right, and there is a huge transformation project occurring, and it's not just in Cisco. It's all these companies that used to sell hardware that they never really made, and they're losing that business. Cisco at the moment are acquiring software companies as quick as they can in order to kind of get income to make their sales look as though they're still floating higher. But the kind of the collapse of the hardware business, which at one point just recently was about 37% of their business, it's going so quick they can't get the software companies to come in and generate the revenue. So something that happened last week, I don't know whether you read about it. John Chambers, he resigned from the board. Now he's the guy that's been there ever since the beginning, and if that's on record, but why did he leave right now? There is something happening, and it's to do with the dispersion of disruptive technologies. Go and read a book called Crossing the Chasm. What we've seen so far on all this innovation, we've seen these early adopters. And you get to this kind of chasm point, and then it jumps. Everything goes crazy, and it goes into the early majority, and that's where we're kind of now. I've been doing this job only for a year and a half, and when I first started, 4% of the people had only ever heard of this. Now I'm going to France and seeing companies selling 800 OCP servers a week. We're going into this new phase, and that when you move into that new phase, all the established players really start to get hurt and burned. And you'll see major changes. You'll see big layoffs in these companies. Cisco announced last week 10% of their staff they're laying off. Just go and have a look and watch what happens. The thing that really seems to be happening to me, everything's going open, isn't it?
It's going open. Yes, it is, because it is, like we said, it's you don't lock in yourself.
Yep.
And also you're trying to solve the problem you want. It's exactly like a smart switch.
Mm-hmm.
This has created the whole market. I give you a platform, I give you a NAS, and you write your own application of what you want to do.
Yep.
Some of it is free. There you go. And it's cheaper as you go.
Yeah.
However, speaking of the giants in the marketplace, they're not going to be quiet. I mean, we have to be ahead of them if that's what we want to do, if that's what we're trying to do. But practically, I think Juniper's in the world, Cisco's in the world, HP's in the world, they're not going to die. They probably will be transforming very fast and become software companies. That is that we have to watch. This is my prediction. I might be wrong.
Well, some of them did it. I don't know, IBM used to have a whole technology business where they used to sell servers, but they got rid of that about, was it 4 or 5 years ago, to Lenovo. They're a software services business. Just watch, they're all migrating. Go and have a look on the websites of Dell Technologies. Go and have a look at HP on their websites. When you used to go on the HP website, you used to see all these servers. When you go on there, you see all this kind of flouncy service stuff about transformation, consultancy, services. They can't make any money in the hardware anymore. That's the sad thing about it. But if they can't make any money, who's making any money in the hardware business as we move into the commoditization of all the hardware?
Silicon guys.
We'll leave it at that. There are lots of opportunities.
No.
Don't be depressed.
Not really. It's
Don't be
competitive.
depressed. There's lots of opportunities in the market.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, if
Yeah,
you
see
know
that.
these new technologies, you'll get a job with any of these players. because they're all screaming out to try and find staff. So thanks for your time. Well done. Do you want to come and just come down?